Welcome to Ceasefire, where civics meets civility and engagement meets empowerment. Ceasefire is hosted by former Bernie ISD trustee and owner of the Bernie Bookshop, Dale Adams, and by former Bernie City Council member and local insurance agent, Ron Cisneros. Ready, aim, ceasefire.
Good morning, Kendall County. My name is Dale Adams.
And I'm Ron Cisneros.
And this is Ceasefire, brought to you by the Bernie Bookshop. And today we're going to talk about the 7 deadly sins and how they relate to our culture. And I want to start off by saying that this is not necessarily a religious discussion. It's a cultural discussion. And sometimes people talk about our culture is doing this, our society is doing that, there's all these problems. And I sometimes look at them and say, well, how do you control a culture? And of course people say, well, the government has the laws and does this and that. Sometimes people talk about society and how it's going down the tubes and all this other kind of stuff. And I ask them, well, how do you control society? How do you guide it? And people talk about laws and governments and, you know, our city council or whatever. And really, that's not what it is. Our culture controls our society, and it's a loose control. But the foundations of our culture go back even deeper. And the 7 deadly sins are... they're impulses, basically. They're human impulses that we all have. And how those play out influences our culture. And I got to get credit where credit is due. I flip radio channels all the time, listening to all different people. Glenn Beck once came out and he was talking about the 7 deadly sins. And I thought, wow, what a concept. How they influence and how can we, in a cultural sense, push back against some of those impulses that we have. And that sparked my interest in this topic. So I want to talk about them, and I want to talk about how they are sort of underlying a lot of the strife and things that we're seeing right now.
All right. So how about a little history lesson first?
Yes.
You knew I was going to do that, right? I love
history.
Yeah, I do too. So where do we get the 7 deadly sins from? Well, in the 4th century, there was a monk named, and I don't do Latin, so forgive me. Yeah, but... I believe the name, if I'm pronouncing it properly.
You were Latin.
Latin? No, I am, but I don't speak it. Evagrius Ponticus, again, a monk in the 4th century, and he compiled a list of 8 evil thoughts: gluttony, lust, greed, sadness, anger, sloth, boasting, and pride. Now, in the 6th century, Pope Gregory I mercifully condensed it down to 7, which is better for me because I can remember those 7. And he took out sadness, which is really important for me because, you know, any fan of Radiohead has to go into their goth mode every now and then, get a little emo. But we've got 7. And those are gluttony, which is excessive consumption; lust, excessive uncontrolled sexual desire; greed is our excessive desire for wealth or possessions; sloth, our excessive laziness; wrath, excessive anger or hate; envy, our excessive desire for someone else's possessions; and then, of course, pride, which is excessive view of one's self.
Yes. And I think it's interesting that people associate these with Christianity, but all religions have sort of a list of the bad traits. And other people, even Gandhi has come up with his list of 7 bad traits. But this one, the 7 deadly sins, have been around for a long time, and they're not explicitly listed in the Bible, but they've accumulated into our religious tradition. And I think it shows up that religion is sort of an accumulation of views and habits that work. And so I believe the 7 deadly sins are sort of these fundamental impulses that we need to learn to control, and that concept of controlling them is a good thing. And whether you believe in the religious foundation or not, these impulses are something that we need to look at and focus on. And I think in our society, we have slipped in that. Mm-hmm. And that we look at these, and some of these things we even glorify, you know? Yeah. I mean, you go to a restaurant and they give you food enough for 4 people. I'm like, and I'm just recently starting to say, okay, I need to make a habit of, I'm going to take half of this home. And even then, I could even eat a little bit less. And so I think it would be good if we could look at these and come up with ways to sort of temper some of them.
Well, I'm going to start us off with gluttony because this is one personal to me because for years I was gluttonous. And people that have known me for a long time know that at one point in my early married life, I was 350 pounds. I was telling Dale before we started recording the show today that I have this year just managed to What did I tell you? I forgot. I was
16.
in the 16 pounds, so this year alone. But it's a constant battle. The desire to eat is strong with me, and it is my little God, my little G God.
Yeah.
It will control my life if I don't get a hold of it. I have struggled with it for years. And this is meaningful to me because I'm also a health insurance agent, so I want to throw some numbers at you. 1 in 3 Americans are overweight. Now, this is according to the National Institute for Health. According to them, 1 in 3 Americans are overweight. Only about 23 to 28%, this depends on who you ask, Pew or Rand or any of these other surveys, only 23 to 28% of Americans exercise regularly, and about 40% never exercise at all. About 12% of all Americans have used some GLP-1 or GLP-1, which are your drugs like Mounjaro and Ozempic, Trulicity, the drugs that were originally designed for diabetics to keep their glucose levels down, and now people are using them to lose weight. And as a result of that, insurance premiums are expected to increase by about 14% over the next year.
So they're increasing because people are using a particular drug.
Yes.
But theoretically, their health would improve, and so maybe their need for medical care would decline, which might, in the long run, might reduce insurance premiums.
Maybe, but their health could also improve if they would cut back on their portions and they would exercise regularly.
Yeah.
That 40%, I'd love to know the stats on that 40% that don't exercise. How many of them are using GLP-1s?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like you said earlier, this isn't a religious discussion. This is you can look at gluttony and take it outside the context of religion, and you can see that it is a problem.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier that in some ways we've come to accept these things, or sort of proud of them, and there's this whole movement of this body positivity, and I'm not saying that we should be critical of people who are overweight. In fact, I shudder when I see videos on Instagram or YouTube that sort of poke fun of overweight people. Yeah. I was that guy at one time, right? I can empathize with them. It's a struggle. So I don't like shaming people, but at the same time, I don't want to accept bad things as good and saying that this is healthy and this is okay and you should flaunt the fat. I'm not there.
I think some of that comes from criticism or positive statements getting mixed up between the act and the person. And so the body shaming thing was bad because it applied a negative attitude towards the person when it was trying to just say, hey, you need to work out more. And I think the flip side has happened is in that by saying, stop criticizing the person over their weight, we're saying, oh, don't criticize the weight. And so I think this comes down to a lot of self-help things. Say, don't criticize people, criticize their behavior. And I think this is that we've been mixing that up on both sides, going both ways.
Right.
And I think maybe should be an effort to separate the where the criticism's going rather than what we're criticizing.
Right.
Now, gluttony can also be in other areas. I mean, there's people that collect things, whether they be Star Wars figures or shoes or whatever. And maybe it's a little bit over the top.
Wait a second. Did you say shoes? He's picking on both of us.
Oh, I got to spread the wealth there.
Well, okay. So let's move on.
Gluttony's more than that.
Yeah, let's move on from gluttony and let's talk about Dale's vice, lust.
Wait a minute.
Let's talk about lust for a minute.
Well, wait, before we move off from gluttony, we'll get to the lust. What's the outlook that we should be striving for to push back against our impulse for gluttony?
Self-control.
Right. Restraint. Just hold yourself back a little bit from things all the time. Don't jump in quite so far when you see that triple burger that's just oozing with bacon and stuff.
Do you remember the former governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura, got in trouble? This is back when I think he was the governor, and he made a comment. It was a very simple comment, and he was criticized heavily for it. And that comment was that weight control was a matter of pushing back from the table. And
in a literal sense, it is actually. Yeah.
And I I heard this when I was 350 pounds, and I knew that he was speaking the truth, and he was criticized for it because a lot of people wanted to say, well, no, it's more than that, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, there are factors. Like in my case, I think it literally was an addiction. I think everybody has their Achilles heel that they take with them, right? Whether it's alcoholism or an addiction to pornography or whatever. In my case, it was food. It's how I coped, right? But you shouldn't let that thing become the excuse that keeps you from having restraint. And he was right. You just need to push back. It really is that simple.
Yeah. Your point about us all having our Achilles heels is really important, I think, because we need to recognize those Achilles heels and address them. And not say, well, I have this Achilles heel that, well, that's just the way it is. My life is going to suck in that little arena there. We need to acknowledge that and say, yeah, I've got an issue with that, and this is how I deal with it. Yeah. And so I think it's important to recognize our faults internally, even if we don't broadcast them.
Right.
Okay, we can move on then. Lust. We've all been teenage boys.
Well, interesting stat, 11% of men report being addicted to pornography in the United States. And, of course, we know what comes with that: exploitation, objectification, unrealistic expectations. And then, I think in marriage, it can present a problem with the way you see your spouse and a lack of sexual satisfaction because you're watching something else that is never going to play out. But
now, how much do you think the sexualization in our open society has contributed to that? Because things are much more sexual in the broader society than they used to be. I mean, you see a lot of stuff in movies that you never would have seen anywhere.
Right. And
it's sort of just done on a whim, and you see all this stuff, and I wonder how much of that's contributing to people having, misguided thoughts about what sexual relations are about.
Well, I do think in many ways we're sort of desensitized, we're just not aware of it anymore because it's just so in your face, right? And we've grown accustomed to it. And when you try and push back just a little bit and say, I think we've gone a little bit too far, then the other side comes out and says, well, now you're trying to take us back to the 1950s and put mom and dad in two twin beds with a nightstand between them. And it's like, no, I'm not trying to do that. But I am trying to say that we don't need 14-year-olds dressed like 25-year-old rap stars or we've just gone too far. I think young people tend to emulate what they see on television, and it's just not healthy.
Yeah, I agree.
We've sexualized children at an early age. It's just inappropriate.
Right. And that teaches them about what's important in life.
Yes.
They're developing their views on the world and what to focus on, the priorities and stuff like that. So to push back against these impulses of lust, what do we do as individuals?
Well, I would say the Bible, but I'm a fuddy-duddy.
And I have a hard time figuring out one of that. I mean, it's restraint, but what's the sort of proactive side of it? And I think maybe it's seeing the beauty in things.
Yeah.
So we go out and you can walk through a forest. It's just phenomenal to see the forest growing. And you can go out and you can, I know everybody's complaining about the intersection of I-10 and 1604 and the development, but I tell you, I see beauty in these huge things that people are creating, and some buildings can just be phenomenally beautiful. And I think if we focus on the beauty and not the sexualization, then it sort of can pull our appreciation for looks in a different direction.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I would add to that, there's a beauty in the mystery of the universe, right? Like when you go out to Big Ben and you look up at the stars and you don't know all the answers, you don't know everything. And there's a beauty as a man, right, to the mystery of women, and just to look upon them and not see everything.
Right.
To see a full-length dress and not be exposed to every little nook and cranny and just the wonderment of women. Or it's just...
Yeah,
I think you're right. It's beauty. There's something else there besides the sex.
Yeah. Okay, on that note, we got to take a quick break. This is Ceasefire with Dale and Ron. We'll be right back. Bernie has its own bookshop. In fact, it's called the Bernie Bookshop. Hi, I'm Dale Adams, inviting you to get lost. Get lost in a good book in our relaxed and casual atmosphere. We have a wide and eclectic selection in the Bernie Bookshop. We pride ourselves on finding what you are looking for. We do author meet and greets, host writing workshops, and can connect you with a good book club. And your young ones will absolutely love our kids section at the Bernie Bookshop. And while we want you to get lost, we're easy to find, as we're in the heart of Bernie at the back of the Richter Tavern building. We are the Bernie Bookshop. Welcome back to Ceasefire with Dale and Ron. We're talking about the 7 deadly sins, and we're sort of walking through each one and how it impacts society and how we can help our culture push back against these impulses. And so what's the next one? How about sloth?
Well, I didn't prepare, so I don't have anything on sloth. No, oh gosh.
We're all lazy. I mean, I'm lazy. I mean, actually, human development comes from people wanting an easier way to do something in life. You know, people didn't want to constantly run around all the time and carry big loads, so they invented cars. Yeah. You know, so the impulse to sloth is also the impulse to make things easier for us. And so it does lead to some good things, but I see it as an apathy kind of entitlement thing. I'm just going to be here and be a fuddy-dud on a log. And I feel that in our society, we become such an entertainment-based society that everything's about entertainment. It's not about achievement like it used to be. I think if people focused on achievement in their life and got self-worth out of achievement rather than about some cool movie they saw, then the sloth would start to fade away some.
I would say that if you're looking for the modern version of sloth, you'd find it in influencers, stimulus checks, your COVID checks, and in the idea of reparations. Trying to get something for nothing.
Political moves there. Okay, let's move on to greed because we don't have as much time as we want.
Okay, greed's fraud. I'm going to put my insurance hat again, and I'm going to share a stat with you on Medicare fraud. In 2023, it surpassed $51 billion. You can see how greed has a negative impact on our society and what it means to us as taxpayers, and you know,
trying to take more for yourself than you have worked for.
Right.
Basically, And honestly, charity and sharing and getting back to the achievement concept are ways to deal with that. Think about what you can do for others rather than what you can get from them.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to some big ones. Envy. I want what you've got.
Well, you can't have my shoes.
Well, I may sneak out with one of these little figurines then. We are taught so much, and I think social media has pushed a lot of this, to be envious of other people and to see other people as having something we want, which is different from greed, I think, a little bit. But it's so prevalent. Facebook even promotes it because we're promoted to present our best side and show everybody how great we are so that they'll be envious of us. And I tend to not be an envious person. I try not to, and maybe that has because I don't do Facebook. I don't know. But envy, I think, drives a lot of resentment and anger that people have.
I think, too, you know, the danger with envy is that you grow dissatisfied and you lack contentment. You start to experience a discontentment with the things that you have. And that can affect your marriage, your relationships. It can affect your attitude about your home. You know, I'll admit right now that there are times when I drive around and I see another town or I see another home and I'm like, ooh, I wish I could have that. And then I have to go home and check myself and say, wait a second. When I prayed this morning and I thanked God for all the things that I've been blessed with, did I mean that? Or did I say, thankful for part of this home, but there's this other part that I don't like, you know? So what are we actually saying when we say we're content, we're happy with all this, but then we go and look lustfully at something that somebody else has, you know, a car, a home? It just builds discontentment. That's a bad thing.
I think that's a great point, and that it corrupts your whole life in so many different areas. Yeah. And I think what you're saying about being thankful, I think gratitude is the answer to that. The more we focus on how appreciative we are for what we do have or what other people have done for us or the blessings we have, the less we're going to feel envious just by natural because they're such polar opposites.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the gratitude thing, that's a great idea. Okay, let's move on to, how about wrath?
Ooh.
There's a lot of wrath in the world today. It seems like everybody's deciding that let's just go out and be violent and push somebody into the train tracks or beat somebody on the head. It just seems to be coming out everywhere. I've even heard somebody saying that we have a more violent society than we did in the 60s when we had all those riots and stuff. And I had to sort of step back a minute because I never really thought of that, but we have riots and we have assassinations happening and we've got all kinds of stuff going on. It seems to just be this violent reaction to unhappiness with something.
Right.
You know?
Boy, this is really topical. I mean, who's that attorney general in Virginia right now that's catching a lot of heat for his texts?
I heard about that.
Jay,
Yeah.
I can't think of his name right now, but he's in a lot of heat right now because he was sending texts to a Republican counterpart while he was a member of their state house, wishing death on the Speaker of the Virginia House and wishing death on the man's children and saying this is the only way that this guy's ever going to feel pain. And it's awful. And this is not a Republican against Democrat rant because it happens on our side too. And it's ugly regardless of who's saying it. It's ugly. Yeah. And it becomes this never-ending cycle of hatred that just takes you straight down into the pits of hell. And no good can come from it.
Yeah.
And we're getting angrier and angrier. We've seen a lot of political violence in the last year, really in the last several years, but this year has been just devastating in terms of what we've seen. It's like mold. Once you let that thing get out of control, it's hard to stop.
Yeah. I do think on an individual basis, how do we control it within ourselves? I think the answer is patience. When we feel this impulse to react to something,
right, even
if it's just verbally abusive or something like that, utilize patience. Just step back and say, okay, let me just think about this for a little bit. Let me just relax and think this through. And then that urge to wrath or to violence will dissipate somewhat, hopefully, completely. Patience, I think, is the first step of working against that inner desire for wrath sometimes.
That reminds me of something Stephen Covey wrote in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The in between the stimulus response and your reaction is that self-control that you have the ability to decide how you're going to respond to something. And so we all have an obligation to not respond to hate with hate.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The distance between the stimulus and the reaction. Spread that out a little bit, folks. Okay, last one. Pride.
Oh, man.
We're always proud. We're proud of our kids. Yeah. We're proud of our community. That's a tough one to say is bad because when we build something, when we do something, we want to feel good about it. And I know what the answer is. It's humility, but I don't know how to really suppress the pride. But I think it undermines a lot because it disconnects us from other people because pride means you're better or some way.
I think it's important that when you are proud of something, you're proud of the achievements of someone else more so than your own achievements. You know, so like I think there's a distinction there. When I'm proud of my daughter getting her bachelor's in nursing, right? Now, I'm not going to go around and suggest that she's better than other nurses. That would be the wrong kind of pride. But to be proud of the achievement of other people, I don't think that's really the problem. I think it's when you're saying that your achievements are noteworthy and should be, look at me and you want to tout that. That's the problem.
Self-pride, I agree. And I think we've got a lot of that on all sides in our society from everywhere, and it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
Get rid of it.
Imagine being like, in Bernie and you like, I've got the largest collection of Star Wars figurines, That kind of pride. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Or you could just have it and let people see it and not really talk about it. Just let other people enjoy it. I tell you, we see the kids walk by these windows and they get a thrill in their eyes.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
It's kind of like my shoes. They're in the closet. They're not bothering anybody. They
are.
Most of them never come out of the box.
Okay. I'm going to interject with this. I've got a couple of books here, and these are cute little books. One is called How to Be a Gentleman. The other one's called How to Be a Lady. It's a contemporary guide to common courtesy. And they're just neat little books that have lots of little things like a lady does not brag, or a gentleman never crunches on his ice cubes except in the privacy of his home. things about being a gentleman and a lady. And I just think they're kind of neat little books. So,
We're not supposed to crush our ice? Would you
not
that
in public.
Tell that to Sonic.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Who started
They're
all
talking
this?
about chewing on it.
Yeah, well, that's Sonic. That's the whole purpose of crushed ice.
But then you don't have to crush it in your mouth. They're talking about crushing your mouth, chewing on it.
Eating ice.
Eating ice. You shouldn't eat
Okay.
ice in public.
All right. Whatever.
Maybe that's one of their higher end things. I don't know. Okay.
This is like one of those disputes on, which hand should your fork be in, Whatever.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up here. That's been a great discussion. Thanks for listening to Ceasefire. And if you missed any of it, you can always go to BernieRadio.com and listen to our podcast for this one or any of the past ones. And we will see you next week.